Welcome back. My next guest is Jason Hellman, a U.S. Army infantry veteran. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Jason, you know, as we do these programs, we find that it's really important to make sure that we're promoting our veterans and talking about the service of our veterans within Clarkstown and Rockland County. And so delighted that you're in here. You're a U.S. Army veteran. So we're going to kind of focus on your service a little bit, and then we can talk about your efforts since you've left from Army service.
Okay.
So maybe just for the benefit of our viewers, you could talk a little bit about your background, where you were born and raised.
Sure. I was born over at Nyack Hospital back in 1989.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 30 years old. I was born and raised in Rockland County. My father, born and raised in Rockland County. So we're true Rockland natives. I grew up in Suffern, and I went through the Suffern school systems from elementary school all the way through high school. I graduated in 2007 from Suffern High School. I went to Rockland Community College for a number of years. I transferred to a school in Vermont for about a year, and then came back down, and really until I was about 21, 22, until I joined the service, I was really just in Rockland my whole life.
Right. So, and I know your family's been involved, with RCC as well, with the foundation.
Yes.
Up there, and some of the efforts is there, there as well. So, how did you join the service? What made you decide to join the military?
I was 21 years old, and all my friends were either been at college for a number of years, away from Rockland, or they had just left after graduating Rockland Community College. And I always wanted to serve my country. When I was growing up, my parents were always getting me the little G.I. Joe dolls. I'll never forget them. I had like 10 of them. Each one was, a different job, doll, but they're not doll, but G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
So I was always kind of like really into the military.
Mm-hmm.
I was a Tolman volunteer fireman for, at that point, it was about 5 years, and one of my best friends had joined the Army about a year prior. So I was in contact with him and in contact with his recruiters, and I just walked into the recruiting station one day with the mindset of what's the fastest way out so I can kind of develop my own person, right? Get away from living at home with mom and dad, and truly kind of develop a relationship with myself and become my own man. Mm-hmm. So I joined the Army. I actually tried to join the Air Force first, but that didn't work out. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't really that interested in the Air Force. Mm-hmm. And I went to the Army, and I fell in love with what they were telling me, and took the practice test, passed it with flying colors, and I chose the job of infantryman.
So what year did you join the Army?
I joined the Army in 2011, so I signed my contract February 2nd, 2011.
Okay, and where'd you go to basic training?
I shipped down to Fort Benning, Georgia in May of 2011, where we did what was called OSUT, One Station Unit Training. So you do the 9 weeks of basic training with the drill sergeants, and you don't ship off to what they call AIT. Mm-hmm. You stay there with your drill sergeants for the remainder 16 weeks, now 22 weeks, mm-hmm. Of your infantry school. And then I graduated September 2nd from infantry school, came home for about a week, and then I flew off to Washington State, where I was stationed there. Okay. And got ready for deployment.
So how long were you in Washington State for, roughly?
Roughly, with a 10-month deployment in between, I was roughly about 3 years. Okay. With some other places here and there.
Okay. So where were you deployed after, you said you had a 10-month deployment in that, but so where were you deployed?
I went to the Arghandab River Valley in Afghanistan. Okay.
And what was the situation like at that time when you were deployed?
We were still on, the COIN method, the counterinsurgency method, but we were still on the offensive, trying to, we would patrol movements to contact. So we were still looking for the enemy. I was on a platoon-sized combat outpost, so it was very small. It was just me and around 30 other guys, and we went on 3 patrols a day. Some were mounted, some were foot patrols. And when I say mounted, I was in a striker unit, so we had our vehicles. And you know, we would gather intel from the different villages, the remote villages that we were patrolling, to see where the enemy was. We were the only outpost on this side of the river that we were on, and the road that went through the town that we patrolled was the main road from Pakistan to Kandahar City, and that was the main route that the enemy took to kind of, you know, fluctuate between Pakistan and Kandahar City. And you know, during the fighting season, there was big enemy presence, and you know, we held the gate to the Arghandab. We worked very hard day in, day night, you know, sleepless nights, and we had a really successful deployment.
So you obviously saw combat then.
Yes.
What was that like, that combat experience? I have two nephews, one that highly decorated Army Ranger, Afghanistan, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, a bunch of other decorations. A nephew was in the Marines, who was in Iraq. Both, you know, the one in the Marines is a little before your time. The one in Afghanistan, pretty close to your time over there. So, you know, what was that like for you? I mean, you know, you're a kid from Rockland, and all of a sudden you're on the other side of the world, rugged country, you know, and people shooting at you, you know, or you know, trying to kill you with bombs. You know, what was the most harrowing experience that you had, and what was that like?
You know, for me, I would say at first, like when you get to basic training, that's all that's put in your mind is kill, 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 and it's such a hypersensitive environment from day 1 or day 0 of what we call it in basic training, to the time that you get to your unit, to the time that you deploy. You're in that hypersensitive mode is almost becomes the norm, right? And I'll admit it, I was scared. You know, anybody that I always say that doesn't say that they were scared is, you know, they're either crazy or they're lying.
Yeah.
And I'll admit it, I was scared when we first got over there. And when it first happened, when we first got shot at, it was, the emotions were, I don't know. I'll never forget them. I'll never forget how fast my heart was beating, but it almost, you just focus. From all your training that you've done with your unit, with basic training, you just, for me, I just was able to focus, and everything just gets really sensitive. So my hearing, even though there's guns going off next to your head and bullets flying over your head, I was still able to hear my team leader speak to me and tell me, all right, we got to move left, we got to push left. You know, they're flanking us, it's coming from, you know, our 9 o'clock. It's really, everything just hones in. And afterwards, that's, you know, we would get back to the outpost, and everybody would celebrate that we just got shot at and that we fought against the enemy. And then I remember at night, it was like the best sleep I got once I was able to kind of close my eyes and fall asleep. Right. It was the best sleep I got out there, just because the adrenaline coming down from it, it felt like, you know, I slept like a rock. Right. You know.
And so that was how often in your 10 months over there did you engage the enemy?
We were in the most politically fragile and lethal area in my battalion's area of operations. So we were seeing a lot. You know, sometimes it was just little pop shots where, you know, the fighters would take, you know, maybe 5-10 shots at us just to get our attention, just to let us know we were there. And other times it was, you know, like, I don't know, I think the longest was like an hour and a half of just, you know, shooting, and a little 2-minute break, and they would pop up somewhere else. So
Did you lose any guys in your platoon?
We lost one.
Okay.
We lost one.
Right.
Sergeant Williams.
Mm-hmm.
So that was.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Where was he from?
He was from Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
I think Saginaw, or no, Saginaw, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
He was from there. He was a great guy.
Right.
Quiet, you know. But when he spoke, it was probably something you wanted to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
Probably wanted to listen to whatever he had to say.
Right.
He was a good guy, a really good guy.
Right. What was it like for you coming back, and then leaving from the service? So I know a lot of vets, and I know you're somewhat involved, I think, with Bridges and
Mm-hmm.
and the veteran peer program, the Dwyer program. You're going like 90 miles an hour in these deployments, and you have people shooting at you, and then you're coming back, and you're supposed to just like, voila, reincorporate.
Right.
Come back to suffering and
Yeah, be normal.
And be normal. Right. So what was that like for you?
At first it was. I told myself when I was getting out, I was gonna take time off, and that didn't happen. I took maybe 2 weeks off, and that's when the wheels started spinning, and I was like, I gotta do something. I can't just sit at home.
Right.
So then I started working for a company called Hellman Management.
Mm-hmm.
So coming back, it was really tough,
Mm-hmm.
honestly. And I don't see that until now. When I was going through it, I just thought it was normal life. I thought, whatever, this is what it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
This is how life is going to be, and I'm going to have to suck it up. And that's what we're told in the military is, we're infantrymen. We're supposed to be cold-blooded killers,
Right.
which we're not. We're human beings,
Mm-hmm.
and we have feelings, we have emotions, and we're told to just kind of suck it up, drink it down, and,
Mm-hmm.
and go out and deploy again and just keep doing that as a cycle. But coming home, the Army had spent thousands and thousands of dollars training us to be soldiers, from civilians to soldiers, right? And putting countless hours and effort. Getting out, I believe now that we need to focus on transitioning the soldier into civilian,
Mm-hmm.
because that's where I'm seeing a lot of my friends struggle, and I had my struggle myself. I'll disclose, I'm over 2 years sober now, but from 2015 to July 27th of 2017, I fell hard to addiction,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't until I was able to put the substances away and really start to work on myself that I really see all these problems that
Mm-hmm.
I had from the military, and then from the trauma. I was bullied when I was a kid real bad,
Mm-hmm.
so all that trauma came
Right.
flooding to the forefront of my mind. The trauma from the fire department that
Mm-hmm.
I never touched. We would see terrible accidents all the time.
Right.
So all that came flooding, and it's organizations like Vet to Vet and the VSO
Mm-hmm.
here in New City that I really think veterans need to use from the day they get out.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to be aware of it while they're in the military.
Right.
I think we need to reach out to the branches and say, find out who's coming back from Rockland to Rockland, and say, all right, we have these appointments already set up for you.
Right.
It was the last thing I wanted to do when I got out. I wanted to go and hang out and just kind of relax. But my dad had set up appointments for me with Jerry Dinella, God rest his soul.
Right.
And I wasn't able to put my claim in for the VA while I was in the Army, so we did it afterwards, and I didn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'm not disabled. Turns out, I do have some disabilities from the
Mm-hmm.
Army. And Jerry explained it to me as, listen, they might be little aches and pains now, but in 30, 40 years, when you can't get out of bed and you can't work anymore, how are you going to live? How are you going to put food on your table
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot? So it was pretty smart, and I urge veterans to do that today.
Right. Protect yourself. I know a number of vets, dealing with hearing loss and
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. Precipitous hearing loss that's taken place. One guy's been on our show, Sean McGee. He's got significant hearing loss. due to his service in the Navy and the in close proximity to planes and the faulty earplugs that were issued. But well, Jason, we're about out of time. We could keep on going, but we didn't really even touch into like your efforts and your work. We'll have to have you back and talk about your efforts and work.
Absolutely.
As a peer specialist, and also in your efforts in your own recovery and the organization that you're working with now in that field. But I want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for your honesty and integrity. Here and talking about your service to our country. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Right. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.